Yuffie is finally here. What's up guys, Veteran Gamer here, and today's review is Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Now for the purpose of this review, it'll be mainly focusing on the Yuffie DLC, but I do want to touch on the base game and the improvements that were made, so if you'd like to skip ahead to the timestamp displayed. That being said, let's get right into it, and let's start with the graphics. The graphics of Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS5 is improved over the standard PS4 version, but that being said, that's not saying much. I'll be frank, other than certain textures that people know about, like Cloud's Door, the visuals, although improved, isn't night and day. It's not like you're playing Miles Morales on PS4 than Miles Morales on PS5 and there's a huge leap. There actually isn't, and that's a credit to how good the game looked to begin with. But you know, it also kind of speaks that the enhancements aren't anything special. In saying that, playing it on PS5, there is two graphical modes that the game gives you. The graphics mode and performance mode. The graphics mode targets native 4K and runs at 30 FPS. Where the performance mode, which is also the default mode, sacrifices that resolution for frame rate. And let's be clear here. That is the only difference between the graphics and performance. There's no enhanced visual effects, there's no ray tracing, there's no added density, nothing. Everything is exactly the same between graphics and performance. All you're choosing as the player is whether or not you want to play it in 4K or do you want to play it in 60 frames per second. In saying that, I highly recommend playing this game in the performance mode, as it is much better in that mode as opposed to the standard graphics mode. 60 frames per second does wonders for Final Fantasy VII, and I would recommend playing it that way. On top of that, the other big enhancement on PS5 is the load times. Load times on PlayStation 4 was about 40 to 50 seconds. In PS5, it's 10 seconds or less. So that is a huge leap, and to be honest, a very welcome one. So in saying that, that's the only real difference between Final Fantasy VII on PS5 versus the PS4 version of the remake. In saying that, let's get into what we're all here for, and that's the Yuffie DLC. With Yuffie, let's be real here, she's a new character for the remake. Obviously not a new character for the story. All veterans remember Yuffie, love Yuffie. She really shines in this. In my opinion, I think the DLC elevated her character from the base game. I think she gets a lot more context in this remake that elevates her character that wasn't prevalent in the original Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 way back when. On top of that, much like all the other characters that were in the base game, Yuffie plays differently. She has a different style, a style that is very similar to that of Tifa, but more at range. You know, where Tifa's fast and in close, Yuffie's fast, but at range is where I find that she played best. On top of that, there's this new synergy mechanic where she can synergize with Sunin. Now, unfortunately, you don't actually get to play as Sunin. You do get to issue commands, but he has this little tweak mechanic with Yuffie where they can combine their ATB charges to make massive combos, which is new for the game, and quite frankly, it adds a lot of fun factor to it because the combos that you can pull off. Another thing to make note when it comes to the Yuffie DLC is there is 0 load screens. You pass through Sector 7 and the Yuffie DLC, and the Sector 7 and Yuffie's DLC as opposed to the base game, there is no breaks. When you played the base Final Fantasy VII, there was breaks in Sector 7 where they'll give like a little bit of a load screen, if you will, or a hidden one, so that you can load the next section of the Sector 7. In the Yuffie DLC, once you boot up the game and you're in, there is no load screens. Like, you don't see anything. It's one fluid thing, which is nice, and it helps prevent the breaking of immersion. With the Yuffie DLC, they even added a couple minigames, one of them being the Fort Condor minigame. This minigame can be nothing short of described as an enhanced version of the same minigame that was in the original back in 1997. And that, in saying that, it's more like Final Fantasy Tactics, but a much simplified version of it. It's a fun little minigame that is part of it. It's not hard to play, but it's a nice little distraction to carry on with the actual game and also find a little secret gem at the end of your side mission for Fort Condor. On top of that, they also added a new traversal system. Instead of climbing traditional ladders and things like that from the base game, there's actually like, it's kind of like wall running, if you will, but it's designated sections. So it's not like you can wall ride willingly. It's you find this wall that is specifically designed for Yuffie to walk on and traverse. It is new. It's not part of the original game, but I find it fresh, and I guess it accentuates the ninjutsu style of Yuffie's character. In saying that, this DLC is just that, a DLC. It takes what was already in the base game and adds to it. It brings a fan favorite character, adds more context to the character, and sets up what could be more stuff for the next iteration, or part, if you will, of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. At the same time, though, if you skip this DLC, or if you just don't happen to have a PS5 at the moment and can't play it, you're not missing out on anything. It's not like, oh my god, you have to play this to continue on. No, you don't. All it does is it adds to Midgar, and it adds to the character of Yuffie and who she is. In saying that, this game, or this DLC, should I say, is a fine addition, and if you do have the original Final Fantasy VII Remake, I recommend playing the Yuffie DLC. And to be honest, if you have the game still, you're probably a fan, you'll probably play it anyways. But I do recommend it. If you don't have Final Fantasy VII Remake yet, and you're planning on getting a PS5, you might as well just wait and get the official PS5 version, as Yuffie will be bundled with it. But aside from that, this is a DLC, it's a fine addition, and this is something that I think everybody should be playing if you are a fan and if you have the game. The DLC in Canadian currency is about $26 by itself, so it's not very expensive. It's not like you're not gonna break the bank to get the DLC. The only real complaint that I had about the Yuffie DLC is that it's short. You know, it is literally just 2 chapters long and about 6 hours and change to do everything. If you beeline the story, you could probably get it down to 4 or so. So, in saying that, it is a DLC. I personally give this DLC an 8.5 out of 10. It's a fine addition. Yuffie's fun to play, but it's just not required to progress throughout the main story, or even to continue on. If you don't play this, you're not really missing anything. I'm Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.